Here at Vectric, we're super excited to be teamed up with the Heart of England Forest charity. This year, we're going to help them to maintain the forest in our local area and also plant a lot of trees. Over the run of the year, we're going to be taking time out every month to go out into our local environment and do something to help make it better. So we thought this project for this January would be kind of interesting if we created something that we could leave out there as a lasting reminder of what we're doing. And this is what we came up with. It's a signpost that we could leave out in the environment as a lasting reminder of what we're trying to do. It was a lot of fun to make, but it came with some of its own challenges. I'd like to kind of talk you through some of those as we look at the file and then hop into labs and see how we ended up making this in the end. As I mentioned earlier, we've partnered up with the Heart of England Forest charity, and they're working towards planting and protecting a forest of 30,000 acres. And as you can see here, they're already at 23% of their goal. They've already purchased area around Ulster, and that's where Vectric's located, where they're going to help to grow and maintain these wonderful broadleaf woodland forests. And we're really excited to be part of this. As you can see, this is a pretty important project. We wanted to come up with something that we could install in the forest that we are going to plant and help maintain, that would commemorate our journey here as a company, but also inspire others to maybe do the same. And when we thought of that, we thought of maybe a plaque, something that we could kind of attach to part of the forest, but then we decided in the end it would be best that maybe we came up with a plaque on a post that we could install in the ground that would be there for many years to come. Now this is the file that you're going to get if you choose to download and install this project. It's not the full project that you're going to see me cut in the end, but this is the bits that will get you started if you decide to go ahead on your journey just like this and help your local environment. Now, of course, like we always say to you, make sure that you take a look at the toolpaths and the file that you're going to get and make sure that everything is set up and it's safe and appropriate for your CNC machine and your setup. This is totally set up for what we do here, but yours is probably going to be a little bit different. So make sure that you go ahead and check through the file and just click OK. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that we have a multi-sheet project. If we go ahead and take a look at our sheets, we have a concept sheet, a plaque sheet, a post left and right sheet, and then a support sheet. Now, these bottom four different sheets are the actual sheets that you're going to use to create your tooling on, and the concept is exactly that. It's a sheet that I used that's at actual size, and I could go ahead and suss out what I was thinking this project was going to be. And because I didn't have the actual materials that I was going to use to cut this project into, I had to go ahead and make some guesses. And then once I had the real material here, then I went ahead and updated this drawing to fit the materials that I had on hand. Let's go back to my drawing tab for a minute. And let's take a look at what we have here on this sheet. So if we go up to our layers menu, you'll see that I've set this out into different layers just to keep my idea correct. So let's just go ahead and hide these ones. And this is the top part of our plaque. So this is actually the plaque, the area of the plaque. It's going to be a live edge piece of oak. And so I drew this just roughly around the piece that we had so I could avoid some of the areas that the live edge was at, and I could decide where I was going to put my elements on the face of this. I decided what angle I wanted to be at so that when you were standing there as a person enjoying the forest, you could actually read it easily. And then I had to go ahead and figure out how to get that attached to a post. So I decided to go with this idea of two supports. There's supports that are angled. They've got a piece that I can actually pocket inside of two holes in the back of the plaque and glue it in place, and it should be pretty secure in there. And at the bottom of these supports, I have this nice little shape here, which is set up for a CNC machine, nice round filleted edges, and it has a place for two dowels to make sure that when I glue this into the side of my post, that'll be nice and strong. If we ever take a look at the posts, there they are right there. Now, one thing that was nice about using this support idea was that I was actually extending the height of my post. This post is a little bit short. The newel post that I could find here locally wasn't all that high, so all that tall, excuse me. So having this added to the top was a great benefit to me. And you see at the bottom of this, I have to go ahead and shape it slightly to fit inside of the spike that I'm going to use to put this into the ground. Now, like I had mentioned a second ago, this was drawn up without the actual pieces here. And then I went in and updated my file to match what I had on hand. And once I did that, then I went ahead and pulled that off to the side of this particular sheet, so I knew exactly what I had to do in the end and the space that I had to kind of lay out the text and the reliefs that I wanted to put on my actual plaque. Now in this case, those aren't here. I'm not going to give those away with this file, but I wanted to give you something that you could start out with in case you wanted to create your own plaque for whatever use you needed. It could be for helping out in an environment around you, or maybe it's to create a nice plaque to put in your garden. It's up to you. This can be used for all kinds of different things, commemorations, memorials, all kinds of stuff. Now, once I had this all done, then I could go ahead and start to break it out onto the different sheets. So now one of the nice things that the sheets allows us to do is we can have single-sided sheets and double-sided sheets. Now, amongst your job currently in our software, you can only define your job as a double-sided job. So every sheet does have double sides. I'm only using that on one of these sheets, and that happens to be the plaque sheet. So you'll see here the basic set of tooling that you're going to get with this plaque is really quite simple. It's just some dowel holes on the top side, so you use a two-sided cut, and then on the back side is the most important stuff. So if I flip this over to the other side, you'll see that I have the pockets for the tops of my support. This square here in the center represents the top of my post. And then I have these two lines here that are actually my cutout lines. Now, because it's a live edge piece of material, I had to cut from the back side all the way across my material. And I'm doing this specifically from the back because I wanted to put my tabs in from the back side. Okay. And also I can go ahead and overshoot. I didn't know exactly if all of my dimensions were 100% correct with the front of my live edge. So if I just went ahead and cut all the way across those two parts, I could utilize the full width of my board, and then I could also make sure that I was cutting past this live edge where necessary. Now you may have asked yourself, why did he go ahead and do a two-sided cut for this particular job or this particular sheet? Well, that's because I've set it up so you can add some V-carving to the front of this if you'd like to, or maybe a relief carving to the front. And you need to cut that first, cut your dowel holes, then flip it over and do everything else from the back side. So it might seem a little odd right now if we're just going to make a blank plaque, but when you start to add content to the front of it, then the two-sided job becomes much more valuable. Now, I won't preview the tooling for that because it's pretty basic stuff, but you'll see that in a second when I show you the file that I cut in-house here. So let's go back to the top of our job again. In our next sheet, we've got our actual supports here. So these are going to be created on a one-sided job, one sheet of oak, and these are going to be about 1 inch thick. Okay? Now, in knowing that, this is the real trick here, is to do a manually indexed four-sided cut on the newel post. Okay, so there's a couple things we need to keep in mind is that this toolpath right here that we're going to use to size down the stump of our post is the same for all four sides, but the top is different for two of the sides, okay? That's important to remember. Now also, I've set up my sheet so that where I'm going to start cutting is from this corner right here, and that is the top corner of my post. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert in a V-bit into my CNC machine, line up with the very corner of that. That will set my X and my Y, take it out, swap in my end mill that I'm going to use to cut out all the pockets and the dowel holes, and then set my Z height from that corner right there. And with the proper kind of jig, I can make sure that as I'm manually flipping this newel post over the 4 times I need to do it, it'll always line up perfectly every time. And you'll see that in a little bit in the lab segment of this video. Now, another thing I forgot to point out about my plaque is I did exactly the same with that. I lined up the edge of my plaque or the edge of my cutter here with using the V-bit. So I was right on the edge of my wood because I wanted to use the whole piece of material. I didn't want to create a cutout pass like I normally would. I just wanted to cut the ends of this off and keep the full width of my board. So I used that V-bit again to set my X and my Y, took it out, and then put in my end mill to then get my Z. And again, you'll see this a little later on in the actual video that we created in the labs. Now this is an updated file of what you just saw with all of the content that I wanted to add on to the plaque. Now, you'll notice that all the pretty colors here aren't like what were in the file we just looked at with all the layers. That's because I actually created this from the original file that I had made in VCarve, and then have made some updates to it and resaved it off for you and sort of fixed the file a bit so it was a little bit easier to use than what I have here. But you'll get the idea. So what I've done is I've added some stuff to the top of the plaque. Some V-carving here in the center. I've added the logo here to the Heart of England Forest, and also the information, because we are a forest founder now, in the year that we are going to do this work in, or the year that we planted our part of the forest. Now here on the left hand side of the plaque, I have a nice bas-relief carving of a hand holding a tree. Now this actual relief carving is available from Design and Make, so if you like it, there'll be a link below in this video and also in the PDF, so you can get a hold of this if you'd like to have it and add it onto your plaque. Now you may ask, why am we now looking at a spire and a second ago we were in VCarve? Well, that's because I had to add in their logo. I had to do a little bit of work to get a nice flat spot here for their VCarve text to land on. Now I'd like to point out to you that this is all happening on our concept sheet. If I look at my 3D view, you'll see that there is the actual relief carving that we have and their logo, and there are a couple pieces of 3D content here. If we go to our modeling tab, you'll see that I have the leaf, I've got the hands and tree, and the rectangular dish. Now I've also added in a zero plane here, and that's just mainly just so that we can clean it up a little bit, and it was way less confusing when I was pitching this idea to the rest of the team. Let's go back to our 2D view for a second, and let's walk through the tooling now that I've developed to actually cut the finished thing that you're going to see in a second. Let's have a look at our plaque. Now you wonder why this is actually rotated, because it's rotated this way for a couple reasons. One is that the way our CNC machine is set up, the face of our CNC machine is over here. And also I had to cut from this side forward because I wanted to line up this nice straight edge of my material to the front of the CNC machine, not this wavy edge. So I'm cutting everything upside down. Let's go ahead now and tile our views and have a look at what we have here. So there we have the hand, the leaf, and the logo. And then we can take a look at our tooling and see what we have here. Pretty basic stuff. We have our doweling, then we have some 3D roughing, and then 3D finishing. We have some text, and then we have some more V-carving here and a little bit more extra V-carving. So if we go ahead and preview all that, we're just going to preview this side. You'll see what we get. There's our dowels. There's a roughing pass that we have. And there's the nice cleanup there. We have some more cleanup up there. I chose to go across the top of this leaf with my finishing tool to make sure it's nice and flat. And then we have some nice V-carving. And you're wondering why I've got some extra V-carving toolpaths in here. Well, that's because this was not a particularly flat piece of wood. So these extra V-carving toolpaths here are me dropping down the bits of this text that I needed to actually recess in a bit deeper because of the way the wood was shaped. I'm lucky enough that when I did the V-carving on the Heart of England, because I had actually run across the whole face of this with my finishing bit, it was nice and flat and true to my machine, where this here, there happened to be a dip in the wood. But that's why that's there. And this will really drive home the idea of why I did this side first, because when you take a look at the back side now, and we preview all sides of my tooling, you'll see that there's those pockets, there are my cutout passes. I didn't want to do my cutout passes from the top because I didn't want to weaken the wood when I was doing those pockets in the back. That when we take a look at both sides of our job, you'll see what we get. Now keeping in mind that there's a live edge that runs along the front of this. But when I cut it out, it's the cutouts in the back side will cut it out. This will be loose up here. And I might end up losing these top two tabs. But that's okay because I have enough support with these two tabs at the back. And it should cut pretty good in the end. So that's the top of my plaque, which looks really good, I think, in the end. Flip this over. Take a look at our tooling for this, for the support. It's very basic. It's just a cutout pass, 2 profile cuts all the way through the material. Nothing too fancy here in the end. It's pretty basic and quick to cut. You'll see there's only one support there. That's because I made a little mistake that I managed to fix, so I had to go back and make a 3rd support to replace one that I'd gotten backwards. Let's have a look at our posts now. They are a bit different. Again, like I had mentioned to you before, we're going to do a 4-sided manual index. So on 2 sides, we're going to need to put these pockets in for our supports. And but on all the sides, we're going to need to actually put this tool path here to make sure that we cut down the stump of our post so it fits inside of the top of that spike. So if we take a look at this tooling here, we have our support hole. Okay, that's where our support is going to go in there. So let's preview that visible tool path. Now we're going to go down 1 inch into our material. It's important that we keep that in mind, because if we don't have enough cutter left outside of our collet to cut the next tool path, then we'd have to think of something a bit different. I'm only going to go in 1/2 inch for the dowel holes, but still I need to make sure I have 1.5 inches worth of cutter sticking out of my collet, a safe distance, so that I'll be able to get in there without hitting that collet on the top of this wood. So if we preview that, there we have it. That looks pretty good. Now, in most cases, we suggest that you put a negative allowance on these. And you'll see here, I did put a very tiny negative allowance on here, just so that we end up making sure that when I force that support into the post, there's a little bit of extra clearance there for you. And that actually worked out really well for me in my case. That was just the right amount. Now what I would do is run the last tool path here, which would be the post sizing. This is going to take off a bit of material off this side of the post to make sure it fits nicely inside of the top of that spike once I get done doing all 4 bits. Then what I'm going to do is once I got those 3 tool paths cut, I'm going to pick up my piece of material. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees and put it back inside of my jig. I'm only going to run this one on the next side. Once that's done, I'm going to pull it back out again. I'm going to flip it over one more time, and then I'm going to run the tool paths for this support here on this side of things, those dowel holes, and also this post sizing tool path here. Once that's done, I'm going to pick it up again, flip it one more time, and then I'm going to cut this tool path one more time to get all 4 sides of my stump of my post here, and then I'll have exactly what I need to fit all of my bits together to make what I hope will be a really nice looking signpost in the end that we can install in the forest. So let's just go ahead and jump into the labs and see how this all turned out. The first parts we're going to cut are the supports to hold the plaque onto the post. I'm doing this first because I'm going to need to test fit this into the posts and on the back of the plaque to make sure everything fits. And if it doesn't, then I can go ahead and adjust those pockets accordingly on either the plaque back or on the top of the post. Now you don't see it here, but I actually made a mistake on one of these and had to cut a 3rd one. Of course, it's always important to test fit your parts in, and I had to make sure this dowel will fit in there nice and snug. Now I'm going to cut these both out of the material, but I'm only going to sand down one right away so I can use it as a part to test fit in everywhere as I need to. So you notice that I mounted the board on the CNC upside down. That was for 2 reasons. One is I need to line up the straight edge, so everything will be carved upside down because I wanted to make use of this area right here, the board. But also I want to reference my start point off that nice crisp line I've got there. In order to do that, I'm going to take out my 1/4 inch end mill and I'm going to swap in this V bit and use that nice sharp point to set my X and my Y. I use that same method on the post to make sure that everything lines up as well. Using that V-bit is a great way to make sure I get a nice accurate start point. We're going to go ahead now and rough out the 3D reliefs or the models on this project. So we're roughing out the section with the hand holding the tree. Now we've moved on to the area where we put the logo for the Heart of Englandforest charity. Now this was good. I didn't notice, and you can see it right here, that actually the top of the material isn't totally flat. So the fact that I went ahead and decided to rough off the top and finish off the top of that leaf made it so it was nice and flat to accept the V carving. Unfortunately, in between the logo and the hand holding the tree, there was a bit of a dip in the wood, so I had to accommodate that a little bit later. Put in that tapered ball nose, and we're going to run that finishing pass. Now I decided to use a raster strategy on the finishing toolpath, and I rotated it by 90 degrees so it followed the grain of the wood. That way, any of the witness lines that are left behind by the finishing toolpath would kind of blend in with the actual grain of the wood, which I think was a great idea. Now this is the part where the finishing actually took off part of that allowance I left behind from a roughing pass and flattened off the top of that leaf so it was true to the surface of my machine, so the V carving cut really nice on top of that leaf. So here we go, and we're going to pop in that 60-degree V-bit and go along and do our V carving. Now as this was cutting along, I noticed that towards the middle of the board there was a bit of a dip. So to fix that, what I did, instead of running the whole VCarve toolpath all over again, I went into the software and broke up the text and so on, and I chose to isolate some new tooling for different sections of the text to accommodate for that bit of a dip there. A little bit of guesswork, but in the end, it was well worth me running back and forth between my laptop and the CNC to get some nice, clean, deep V carving. That looks great on the front side. I'm really happy with that. Again, test fit those dowels in there, cut the dowel holes in my wasteboard, put those dowels right into the wasteboard, and then we fit on my plaque. Now you can see that there is the bend in the actual surface of the material, and as you'll see in a second too, I take a second and kind of think about whether or not it's down nice and flat or not. Yeah, bit of a concern, but anyway, everything worked out in the end. So here I am cutting the pockets for the actual supports in the back. Now these could have stood to be oversized a little bit more than what I did. When I did put the top onto the supports, I could use a little bit more wiggle room, but in the end it worked out okay, but you might want to consider that if you're going to make a plaque like this in the future. And here we are cutting those two profile cuts along the edge of the plaque, from the very front of the board all the way through the other side, through that live edge. I decided to cut these from this side, obviously, so I could leave my tabs in there. And there we go, test fitted that in there, it fit perfectly. You'll notice that I still left the live edge on there. I'll take care of that later on. Now here I am setting up the jig for the post. I needed a way to support my post on the CNC machine so I could easily pop it out and rotate it 90 degrees. And this is what I came up with. I had to pre-drill my holes, and then I put them down on the wasteboard and then fitted in my post. It's nice and tight in there. I was worried about a little bit of lateral movement with that particular part because I didn't put a brace at the other end of the post. So I opted to use a bit of double-sided tape to hold that down and hold it from shifting a little bit, and that worked out really well. Now this is a newel post, so you see there's a hole in the end of it. Luckily enough, I avoided cutting through, and there was enough material there, I think, to still make this last for a very long time. Now it's important that I made sure I had enough clearance on my collet, so when I cut the support hole and the dowel holes in the top of this post, then I wouldn't hit my collet on the top of my material, and I had lots of room, so that was perfect. Now I'm going to cut the support hole on two of these sides. So there's the top done, and now we're going to go ahead and do that pocket at the bottom. I probably could have sped this up a little bit, but I didn't want to tear the material too much. And also I didn't want it to kind of wiggle out of its little jig that I made there. So slow and steady in this case. Always test fit those dowels in there to make sure they fit okay, and they fit perfect. And the support fit in there nice and tight, just like I wanted it to. So I pulled it off, add some more tape to the next side, and then flip it over and put it back down again. On this side, I'm only going to cut the bit that's going to fit inside of the spike. Then we're going to turn it over again. And you don't see it here, but I actually cut the support at the top, the support hole at the top already. And then I've come down and cut the bottom here so that it'll make sure that it fits into that spike. This is the third side, and we have one last side to do. Flip it over one more time. And there we go. And it fit in there just perfectly. Now I'm going to go ahead and sand all my parts down. I need to cut those dowels that we're going to hold the supports in place. So I cut those to the right length. Sanded the tops on just a little bit so they could easily be pushed in. And then made sure everything fit together nice. Lots of glue to keep it together. There's lots of surfaces in there. With the right amount of glue, it should hold together for a long time. Fit in nice and tight, and then we're going to go ahead and add in the dowels with glue on the edge of those again. Can never have too much glue in this case. Then we'll do the other side, and you'll see that that was the support that I replaced. And there's a bit of a dip in the wood, so it looks like it doesn't quite fit in there, or it's a little bit shallow, but that's only because of the dip in the wood. It's the only piece that I had, but in the end it still worked out just perfect. Let's remove that live edge treatment off the front of our plaque. We'll still have that nice angle at the front, but I don't want that bark on there. I want that off of there. Do a little bit of sanding to make it a little bit smoother. We're going to fit that all in there, make sure everything's good. And then we'll cut off the extra length of dowel that we have. Now I opted to use a decking oil for this, hoping that that would help it survive out there in the wild. I think it'll do great. I added 3 coats of this on there and may even add a 4th before we go in and install this. Well, I really enjoyed making that. It was a lot of fun to do. I don't think I'd change much about the project at all. I think the finish is nice. Yeah, I think it's going to look really great out there, and I think it'll last a really long time. Well, I hope this has kind of inspired you to go out into your local area and help to either plant a tree or keep care of the environment so that it's around for the future. I think this is a great way to start off this year. Yeah, I think so. So anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you want to be notified when new videos come out, make sure you click on that little bell. Anyway, thank you so much, and keep safe. And until next time, we'll see you then.